it's a really dark time right now. The international situation is darker than at any time that I can really remember. The federal government is just on an unsustainable financial path, period. There's all the culture issues where it just seems like we're tearing each other apart. And our politics is so paralyzed and so polarized that we seem incapable of beginning to deal with any of these things.
Like right now, I'm not, like, it's not stressing me out. And I think that has come in time. I mean, and I would even say for me, 2020 was really like a checkpoint and like me having to capture my thoughts and saying like, hey, I'm not in control of this stuff. And I had to stop like looking at news feeds every 15 minutes and checking all the things. So this has been a progression for me.
So anyway, it's not like I'm not worried about evil robots. I'm worried about stupid humans.
Gotcha. No, is there a risk of evil robots in your opinion? Like, is that even a
No, because
risk?
I don't think robots can be evil. Well, AI art isn't art. And like that is almost like a hell I'll die on for me, because I just don't think you can make art if you're not a human. Because AI doesn't create anything. It just regurgitates things. Like, AI does not have any sort of creative impulse, right? It's not inspired. It's not asking questions. It's not trying to achieve something. It just makes stuff, right? There's AI art is the same thing as a factory assembly line where this thing stamps license plates or molds or whatever. It's the same thing.
Just because I don't believe or agree doesn't mean I can't learn from you.
Why did you have to bring that up?
Okay, that one I'm super embarrassed about.
Do you like me?
Do I like you?
Yeah.
As an individual or as a podcast?
As a person.
No, I like you.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I don't have any interest in appearing to be stronger than I am.
I ain't bow to Nebuchadnezzar's statue. He gonna lead. You feel me?
How do we love people who see the world differently than we do?
What would it look like if we truly loved all of our neighbors? Could listening to their stories be the first step? This is Seacoast Church, and there's way more to talk about.
I don't think probably anybody likes the terminology, Lynn. I say that we talk black stuff with you.
Yeah.
We're talking Jack stuff today.
Jack stuff.
Jack stuff today.
A welcome change from black stuff.
So welcome to the Seacoast podcast. If you are a first-time listener, let me go ahead and map this out real quick. So this is a father and son that we have sitting at the table, and you guys have both sat at this table pretty frequently, just never together. And we have, I'd say we've explained it a couple of times as far as Jack the Greater, Jack the Lesser. I want to just go ahead and clear the air right now. You came up with that distinction, correct,
Yes.
Jack? So you gave yourself the nickname Jack the Lesser.
Yeah, well, when we both kind of came on, well, we've been part of Seacoast forever, but we both kind of came on staff within like a month of each other, something like that. And so there were a lot of people who knew me, and then there were people who knew my dad, but there was, kind of not a ton of overlap. Or rather, I would say there were substantial people who didn't know both of us. So it was confusing for a little bit. And so that was just kind of my offhanded way of, telling the difference. And it has stuck around a very long time.
Yeah. We've got so much that we have to accomplish, Lynn, having them both at the table, because this opportunity doesn't come around all the time.
This is my favorite episode, and it hasn't even started.
I was just going to say, I think this is your Little House on the Prairie episode. All right, I want one. You sent me the wrong email. You meant to send my son or dad stories from both of you. I got to hear just one that comes to mind. You guys were both working at Seacoast, so you both had actually, you stuck with your Gmail, I think, throughout your years here. But give us one story, Jack.
Yeah, okay, well, there's one that comes to mind where I was actually out, I don't know, I was out in my neighborhood, and a staff member who happened to live in that same neighborhood saw me out, and they said, "Hey, I just sent you an email. I need you to not look at it. I meant it for your father." And it was, and so I'm like, that's fine. So I just saw it, deleted it. But it's like, obviously there was some legal stuff or for lawyers or whatever. It's not necessarily bad. Just there are things that I can't see. I think almost everyone has made that mistake at some point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Our founding pastor once sent an angry email or was that angry text maybe? I can't remember what the issue was, but he kind of like the bang, 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 but he sent it to me.
Well, so his one that happens, I mean, not regularly, but it happens every once in a while where it'll be like a Friday or Saturday and my phone will, go off and I see it's Pastor Josh Surratt and I'll pick it up and go, hey, what's up? And he'll go, hey. And if there's that pause, I know you meant to call my dad. He's always like, I'm sorry about that. I don't care. It's fine. But yeah, that's always a funny one because I can always tell right away when someone has called the wrong Jack Hoey.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I want to share this and I want to get Lynn's take because you and we've come into Seacoast at different seasons and everything, but I think, and I don't know the proper terminology for these things. I don't know if it's legends or myths, but there has been a mystique about the greater at Seacoast at different stages. When I came on here and I saw you for the first time, someone told me, hey, and they were serious, and I don't remember who it was, but they said, that guy, he's so smart. He has written down a plan to get this country out of debt. And it's complete. I mean, he's got the details. Like if he were to send it to the current president of the United States, we could get out of debt as a country. This person is dead serious. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, this dude is unbelievably smart. And I'm thinking, I wonder how that got started. I could hear Pastor Greg leaning over to somebody, hey, that's my friend Jack. He's really smart. He has some good thoughts on the economy. That's how it started. And then next thing you know, like a telephone game now. He has got a comprehensive plan to get this country out of debt. Like, how much experience do you have with Jack the Greater here? How much interaction?
I think he was one of the first people I spoke to before I moved from the Irmo campus to the Mount Pleasant.
So, do you
campus.
feel like you're kind of sitting with a legend?
You were part of I was part of the interview team.
Yes, and so that was my first experience. I hadn't heard of him outside of coming down to Mount Pleasant. But when I got here, there was this sort of like, and I don't know if it's because you had the title greater but people would, and still today, people are intimidated to talk to you. Somebody said maybe a month ago that if they see you in the breezeway, they don't make eye contact because you're going to ask them what they're reading. Or you're going to you're going to ask them something that intimidates them. And so, yes, the moment that I got to Mount Pleasant, I think that was like the common theme around. And of course, in your office, the board of words that they were not supposed to say.
Prohibited words and phrases.
Added to it.
Oh, man. And I've got a couple stories I want to share about you because you were my supervisor for a good little while there. But before I do that, I want to play a clip from a former episode, and this will bring some laughs to all of us. And if you haven't heard it, you're about to have maybe an awkward but dad moment where you're like, that was really sweet that my son said that about me. Do you ever wish that your dad would be a little less humble and a little more aggressive?
That's so funny. I actually get like a little bit anxious whenever there's an episode with my dad. Sometimes I don't listen to them because I'm like, obviously like my inclination when anyone disagrees with my dad is be like, you're an idiot. But I do, they're like every time, whether it's the podcast that he's done like with Godless, right? Like your old one or this one, there are moments, and I honestly think this is where it's like my dad is in a lot of ways. We're different people, but I do feel like he's just an older, wiser version of me. Because there are points where someone will say something and I'm like, get him. and he never does. And I think, like the definition of meekness is power under control. And I think about my dad a lot because there's a lot of times where I know what my dad thinks about certain things. And I feel like if he wanted to, there's opportunities for him to just go to town on people, and he never does. And I don't think that's a mark of humility, though it is humility. I think it's just kind of a graciousness and an understanding, which I think would really be good to come back in this world is I don't have to be right. I don't have to show you how wrong you are.
Nice. Doesn't that make you feel? Yeah, it's got to make you feel good and special. My gosh.
So
I hope I hear my son talking to me that sweetly.
But now that we're here, not attacking Godless when he had the chance, and not releasing his economic plan, I feel like these things are connected, and maybe not as flattering as I had thought.
Oh man. So I don't know if you remember this no, I forgot. I was going to really put you on the spot with a great question. Listen, I'm sorry. My gosh, I got ahead of myself. If everybody on the face of this earth had a ranking as on their head, everybody's walking around, they have a ranking as far as how smart they are of everybody. So maybe it can fluctuate in real time, like as we're taking on different knowledge. So there's somebody walking around the world, he's got number 1 on it. It's like, whoa, that's the smartest guy. That'd be cool. We all know, oh, Lynn is 1,300,000. Oh, Joey is 2 billion. Well, whatever. What ranking is on his head?
Oh, I don't know.
Is he in the top 1,000?
No.
What?
Well, I mean, that's just not a hard question.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
I really want to put you on the spot. What would you say? Top million?
So top million would be in the top,
probably like 0.000
1/800th of 1%. So no, I would say not.
I do want to ask, I think, what would be a very fruitful question, because I do lean in on listening to you and your wisdom and all of that. But I know it's kind of uncomfortable, but reflect on that, because that is an unbelievably strong characteristic, because you don't have to say it for yourself. Everybody already heard it. You have acquired a lot of knowledge. You're good in the business world. There's just a lot of things that you have to share. And it seems like you have found some sort of nice balance of not carrying yourself in that way. But I would say to the point where many people have not figured out the balance that well. So really good compliment to you. But gift our listeners with, was that a process? And are you a fake? You know what I'm saying? Like, are you like, you guys just don't know how arrogant I actually am?
I have no idea how to address this. Here's, I think, just one of the fundamental things about being a human being. It's like who am I? And I think task 1 is to see yourself in a proper relationship to God. And we are all awfully small and finite and limited and flawed, when you're looking at that comparison. So, that's the first thing. And then, the other thing is, and what are we all here to do? It's, we're here to love God and love our neighbors. We're here to be a loving part of the community that we're in. And, so I think the other thing, I, as a young man, was very ambitious, and, what I feel like I learned from some of my experiences over time was, first of all, like, what was more important to me than climbing whatever ladder I happened to be on, and why. And, I think that they both kind of come back to this issue of trying to, flourish in the way that God designed you to flourish, and understanding what that looks like. And so, for me, probably like a big change. I started off with a global company, and left after about 12 years, because what I realized was that the most important thing to me in terms of my work was I wanted to be able to manage in a certain way, and that I could never do that in a big company. I had to be working for myself, or in an environment where I had tremendous autonomy. So, I don't know. I just, like, to me, the whole thing about trying to walk through life and grow spiritually is trying to come up with that understanding of what is it that God wants to use me for, and how can I equip myself to flourish in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question. or not.
I think it's great. I don't know if you remember this or not, but a couple of stories I have with you being my supervisor, it was crazy because it was a Christmas Eve, and for some reason I was able to. I think my family we celebrate Christmas Eve out in the country, and we were able. They celebrated it way earlier in the day, so my wife and I were able to. Priscilla and I and the family were able to drive there and then still do the Christmas Eve services. Well, we had just made a business relationship with the Terrace Theater. And now Paul and I are great friends. And so I can say on the air how crazy of a situation this was, because at the time we were not. But everybody knows how big of a deal Christmas is. I mean, at church in Seacoast, there's so much. So we go into a movie theater and we have to convert all sorts of things to make it a Christmas Eve service, the band, the sound, and all of that. And so he calls me and he says, hey, we had a little bit of a change in the movie schedule. You're not going to be able to get into the theater until about 5 minutes before the service. And I was like, Paul, are you serious? And I was very new in leading a campus. And I was like, oh my gosh, I called you up. And do you remember what your advice to me was? Your advice was, tell him he can't do that. And I was like, oh, okay. So, I mean, you're literally like, that's not something that he can do. He can't just throw that at you, and I was like, I think I texted, I was like, Paul, you really can't do that. And I think you walked me through, how to address that with Paul. But that was a big learning moment for me, because I was like, what are we going to do? I mean, we're completely stuck. And you were right. He can't, do that. And then I was meeting with you one time. I don't know if I've told you this before, but I was sitting there and I was trying to keep focus, but I kept almost passing out. I was super hot. And anyway, I actually had 104 fever. So you were almost the last person I ever talked to, because I was blanking out and everything, but I made it home and I was safe and all of that.
It's so weird.
What's so weird?
To share.
Why is that weird?
It's just a strange thing to say.
What's so strange?
Well, everyone is potentially the last person you talk to. That's not special.
I don't know. Now we have to cut some laughing, because that's really funny to me. All right, so you guys just started a Substack. I know for a fact that there are many people who have no clue what a Substack even is. So give us a snapshot of what Substack is before we even dive into it.
So, I think maybe the best way to describe a Substack, it's kind of like a blog and a newsletter, it kind of combined. Like, the thing with the blog is, the way there is, you got to go there. And, with newsletters, it's you have something show up to your inbox, but that's really kind of what it is. And the Substack is both. And so, I started paying attention to Substack, like a lot of people, over the last few years, because a lot of very high-profile journalists have left newspapers and magazines, and started Substacks. And so that was really interesting. And so I checked it out. And, I used to have a WordPress blog like 15 years ago, and I never really liked it because I always felt like I was using 2% of what it could do, and the other 98% was just like totally opaque to me. I didn't understand any of it. With Substack, it's unbelievably simple on the back end, which I really, really enjoy. So anyway, I know that I've been trying to write more for a long time, and so as we talked, that's something that we thought we'd enjoy doing together, and we're both trying to write more. And so we started talking about it, I don't know, probably about this time last year. And just kind of took our time and figured it out. But yeah, that's basically what a Substack is. So you can, you can subscribe to it, but you don't have to. You can just you can just go there and read it like a blog if that's what you want. But yeah. Yeah.
And subscribing, is there like a financial arrangement?
There can be.
Yeah, that
but
can be.
That's not something that we have. Right now.
And so y'all Substack is called Matter at Hand. And how did it come about? Like, were y'all just talking one day and thought, like you were just saying, it'd be fun to write some stuff together? And
well, I think I brought it up. My recollection is I've been working on a book manuscript, and one of the things that I've been realizing as I started the research publication side of things is that whatever path I chose there, the whole question comes down to what's your social media presence. And I don't have any, and I kind of like refuse to. But I had, like you, there were a couple of Substack newsletters that I was subscribing to, and it just seemed like a great tool. And we'd talked about it a couple times, and I just thought, well, this would be good. I'd like to start writing regularly. This would be a way to see if anybody's interested in what I write. I knew that you wanted to start writing more regularly, and I thought this could fit both of us then.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of started the conversation.
Yeah.
You've at least heard of Substack, right?
No,
Or is this
not until this conversation?
Really? It's a first? Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
the first.
Yeah. Yeah. It does feel like it's almost it almost feels like a response to mainstream media, almost like how indie and punk music was back in the day to mainstream music. It's like, no, we're going to get back to the rawness of this is real, you know? Is that kind of a...
Yeah, I mean,
do you like that analogy or no? I'm not saying
no,
you're
I don't
punk
dislike
rock.
it. It is a bit strange because, you know, in a sense, I mean, you could say, well, what's different about than how it's been for the last 20 years? Yeah. I mean, but I do think it is different, and I would struggle, I think, a little bit to articulate why Substack feels so different than just, again, like plenty of people had blogs 20 years ago. But it does feel different. I do think part of it is the platform itself. But it has really over the last couple of years become a very significant, it's not even an alternative in itself. I would say it's an alternative place for people who, you know, whether it's they feel kind of stifled at the, you know, outlets that they're a part of or, you know, kind of whatever, you know, kind of enables them to, you know, kind of build their own audience, and, you know, kind of write what they're wanting to write. And so, you know, I think that it probably, you know, gives you a little bit more connection with your audience than, you know, traditional blog did. But yeah. Yeah.
How does your audience find you? So when you guys started it, how did you gather your followers? I guess, do you call them followers?
Well, Jack over here makes some TikTok videos and puts them out.
I can see that.
We just, you know, sent out invitations to people we thought would be interested.
Yeah, I would say, you know, the most important thing we did was have an enormous family all along. So in that sense, there's tremendous foresight there.
Yeah, well, it's definitely some good stuff, and I want to get y'all. I mean, you guys talk like a lot of wellness things, AI. We got some waffle talk, but I do want to talk about the question at hand: is America going to be okay? And I want to get into some AI when it comes to that, but I want to get into some of your healthy mind stuff. And I love this line, and I would love for you to kind of, you know, I read it, and then I read everything that it surrounded it, and I was like, that would be a really good one for you to unpack for our listeners. But it seems to me what the fundamental cognitive task is to understand what is in front of us. That was a big sentence that kind of caught me, and then just kind of connected so much. But to explain to people what you mean by that.
Well, you know, so, you know, I'm sitting here looking at this camera, and the way that it feels is that I am directly apprehending what is in front of me. But actually what's happening is I've got these receptors in my eyeballs that are taking in information, and they are relaying it to a part of my brain that is interpreting it. So, you know, it's not a direct process. It's actually a complicated process. And it is a process that, though we think it's automatic, actually is subject to some error. Like, did you ever see what you wanted to see? Did you ever see what you expected to see? The answer is yes. And, you know, I think if you apply this not just to like literal vision, but to the way that we try to understand the world as leaders in particular, you know, we're trying to make sense of the environment that we're in, and seeing it accurately is critically important. And yet we have a lot of field distortions that can affect how accurately we're seeing. And ironically, I think a lot of that is a bigger problem for successful organizations than it is for failing. If you're a failing organization, you have a strong motivation to try to see what's, you know, figure out what you're missing. But successful organizations, you know, a lot of times what happens is here's something new that comes along that is disrupting your program. Well, we just need to try harder. Somebody's not doing their job. It's the first response often is to dismiss rather than to say, stop, wait, let me look and make sure that I'm seeing this clearly.
Yeah. Yeah. You had told me this a long time ago, just because you and I have been friends for a good little while. And I read in one of your posts how we should go ahead and read the sort of books that we are currently interested in. You said that there are people who have books that they say, I keep trying to get to that book. Well, if there's books that you have just laying around and you say, I keep trying to get to it, kind of means you're not interested. Well, then don't read it, because you need to read what you're actually gravitating towards. And I thought that was fascinating. And I've kind of thought about that before. Like, I've got tons of books that I want to read, but then there's some of them I look and I'm like, ooh, that one, I just want to start that one. That one sounds really interesting. And I'd pick that one instead of one that may be more like, I want to learn this stuff, but it doesn't sound as exciting.
Yeah. I mean, my thing is read what you're hungry for. And if you do, you'll read more. If reading is this obligation that I need to read the thing that I should read, you'll read a lot less. And that's kind of my thing, is read more. Reading more is good. And you can develop a taste for some of these. There may be that book that, because you're in a regular pattern of reading, there will be a moment where it's the right time to read it, and you'll want to.
Yeah. And I want to ask all of y'all this, because I think it was a 4-parter, and I want to say the last one had a lot to do with intellectual exploration, if I remember correctly. And as I was reading it, I was thinking, there are a lot of people who really love intellectual exploration. And I think along the lines of, there are a lot of people who really love to run. Mm-hmm. They just love it. But you would still say, just like we would say, well, running is important for everybody, or some form of exercise, intellectual exploration is important, even if it's not something that gets you all excited. Because there's some people, they're just like, I don't want to think about that. Like, I've been working all day. That's the last thing I want to do, is think about stuff I don't understand.
Well, I think what I would say, though, is that, and it probably wasn't a point that I made terribly clearly, but I don't think it has to be intellectual exploration. So, like, the one example I gave was my 88-year-old mother who is memorizing the book of James. That's not an intellectual process necessarily, but that's a spiritual depth process. And so I think that was kind of the title of that piece, in fact, was Go Deep. And, I tend to think about, I'm interested in a lot of intellectual exploration, but not everybody is. And my feeling would be there's something that you should be going deep on, though, spiritually, if nothing else. And how do you do that?
Well, I mean, yeah, okay. I want to go that way, but I know we can't, because we've got limited time here. Jack, by the way, we just needed you at the beginning. Yeah, and I want to get into your AI thoughts when it comes to art. Mm-hmm. But I do want to focus in now on the question of, is America going to be okay? And obviously the okay piece is a very subjective terminology. But before we go to AI and dangers it could pose, and then some, I guess, a little more less scary art implications, or maybe just as scary, tell us about those birth rates. That's super interesting, as far as just, is it the lowest birth rates we've ever seen as the world, or as a country? Like, give us a snapshot on the current state of affairs when it comes to birth rates. I think Japan has the lowest. See,
now, this is great. This is actually a real-time example of an email going to the wrong Jack. Because Joey's sitting here looking at my dad asking this question, but I'm the one who wrote about birth rates. This is amazing.
Well, hey, I will say this, though. In my defense, he brought it up in a conversation on this podcast about the economy. So I actually sat down with him and talked to him about it. Okay. That's a good excuse. That's it. He actually brought it up.
Sure.
Okay, go for it.
No,
See, we really do need you.
Now I'm hurt.
I've heard your dad's thoughts on it. I want to hear yours now.
Okay. Well, I just think it's so like basically the deal is birth rates are kind of falling almost universally. There are some countries.
Did you know this, by the way? I had no idea.
I did not.
I had no clue.
There are some countries where this isn't true, but it's in really the highly developed countries, the birth rate is falling. In some, in a lot of countries, it's well below replacement level. I think it's like South Korea, it's abysmally low. A lot are below 1, and like a replacement rate is like 2.5. And this isn't like some, like conspiracy or something in the water thing. It's just like, that's kind of what you tend to see as countries become more developed and affluent is that birth rates tend to decline. That's for a number of reasons. But, at some point you just kind of have the question of, well, how sustainable is, the current standard of living in the way we do things if you have a lot fewer humans going forward? And so and no one really knows.
A lot. Give us a number. Like how less babies are we having than typically? Like or how sharp the decrease in the last decade ish. I mean, just I don't know what kind of numbers we're talking. Like,
well, so the population of Japan is likely to decline by about 30% in the next 30 years.
Wow.
It did in the last 30 years.
If you project it out. So to his point. 2.05, I think, is the
2.05. That's right, not 2.5.
So in other words, the average woman needs to have 2.05 children if you're going to maintain the population. South Korea's is a little bit above 1/3 of that. It's like 0.78, I think.
Yeah, 0.78.
Wow.
And so again, like what? So you think like when probably the best known example of significant population. Well, actually, I'll bring up two. One is the Black Death in Europe. Mm-hmm. But again, like that's a civilizational disaster when you have population contract so much. The other that I can think of would be actually Ireland during the Great Potato Famine. And the deal is Ireland's population, and there's emigration involved there, but Ireland's population has never been as high as it was before the Great Potato Famine, like 250 years ago. And that has real consequences for how your country can function and what it can do. And, and that coupled with, at some point you're going to have just this incredible, because in general, kind of what you see in, charts of, kind of age distribution is, it, kind of goes like this as you get towards the, the older population tends to, obviously is, the older you get, the fewer there are. But like now you have this weird, curve where it's a lot skinnier at the bottom than it used to be, and that's not good.
So here's a vivid. In Japan, more adult diapers are sold than baby diapers.
Is that not crazy?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. I'll tell you one picture of the way I see. I grew up in Pittsburgh, and so you go back to Pittsburgh, the population of the city peaked in about the year 1900. And the decline was slow for a long time, and it's just continued steadily. And so they can't maintain their infrastructure. You drive past whole areas that are just largely abandoned, and roads look like boy, this is.
Is this what we're seeing in the customer service industry and fast food restaurants and things like that? I mean, is this part of what we're seeing? Is just not enough workers, sort of thing?
Yeah.
What does it look like? So you're talking about Japan in 30 years. What does America look like in 30 years?
Well, one of the things that's been a big offset to the lower birth rate, first of all, our birth rate isn't nearly that low. It's a little bit below replacement, but not drastically. And then the other factor with the U.S. population is immigration. So we've continued to have population growth largely because immigration has more than offset the lower birth rates.
Yeah. Well, and the other country that I've seen brought up a couple of times, but not as much, just because right now its birth rate isn't as bad as some of the other places. But so you look at Russia, so they've had tens of thousands of young men get killed and hundreds of thousands of young men leave the country. So what does Russia look like in 50 years? Or like, is there even like can it even stay together? Just because of the depopulation of so many young men leaving or being killed. that is sort of I don't know, that is a kind of crazy what if. What does it look like in 50 years?
Yeah. Yeah. Are we, as Christians, I think this is a tough question for all of us to grapple with, but there is, I wouldn't say it's a Christian thing. I'd say it's a just humanity thing. A lot of us really care about the economy, and that's a good thing, but it does sometimes make me pause for thought when I think of how important that is for me, the economy. And when it is, I think how it's affecting my wallet, my money. And it just makes me think sometimes, how good am I doing of being in the world, but not of it? Because there's for sure more important issues than just the economy. But that statement right there is probably not maybe too simplified. But how would you feel about people who economy is like, that's what they are looking at the most? So if one of the candidates have a better track record with the economy, that's what I'm voting for, because that's what I care about the most. Like, do y'all think that?
Well, the only thing I would say there, and again, if you say one of the candidates, you assume you're talking about like the presidential race. The only thing I would say about there is you're also looking at what is the person's job. I mean, you could say that the two most important aspects of the president's job are to guide economic policy and to oversee national defense.
Yeah.
So, their position on lots of other things, though it may be at some level more important than pure economics, it's not their job.
Yeah. 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 And we've talked about this before as far as, I mean, do we still call America is it still considered the powerhouse of the world? I mean, maybe not, but we talked about how a lot of people are like, why do we get so concerned about America being the powerhouse? Like, that's a bad thing. But you and I were talking, and you asked the question, well, what other country would you want it to be? Mm-hmm. Because we were talking about this country's not perfect, far from it. There's corruption here just like anywhere, but there are other countries that you could just point to me like, well, I'm glad they're not the most powerful. But when I want to think about AI, the future of this country specifically, but before we go AI, how do you feel when people lament over, oh my gosh, are we seeing the end? Like, how do y'all feel about that?
I mean,
wasted thought, wasted anxiety?
No, not necessarily. So like I can't remember how you said it a few minutes ago, but something like, like what does the future look like for America? It's like, well, what's your timeline? It's like 25 years, because like, if your timeline's 500 years, then not great. But I mean, that's not really what we're talking about. I think I read a lot of history, and I just think that a couple things are that, at some point things, fall apart. No country or civilization sustains things forever. But, I think the resilient ones tend to go through cycles of decline and then, kind of a rebirth of sorts. And, so decline doesn't have to be final. And then at some point it is. So like I'm right now in the middle of a trilogy about the Civil War, and it's just so funny about how many of the things that sort of like plagued their society, just in terms of how they related to one another. Like the thing that was cracking me up as I was reading about, I think it was General McDowell's straw hat. And so just one of the Union generals had this straw hat that he liked, and it was, a little bit ostentatious, but it was so unusual that there were a lot of his own troops who assumed that he was a traitor and that the straw hat was so that the rebels would know not to shoot him. It's like, that is as ridiculous as anything I see on Twitter. And it's the same kind of thing.
It's the same kind of thing.
It's the same kind of thing. So it's sort of like the, not so different, also, very different. So what are America's prospects? I don't know, better than a lot of people tend to think, but also things can, kind of go bad very quickly and in unexpected ways.
Yeah. You don't know. I mean, I guess the way I think about it is, you can make a case for it's a really dark time right now. The international situation is darker than at any time that I can really remember. In a real sense.
Dang, that's heavy because that's 9/11. That's the early 90s war.
Yeah.
That's all the wars on terror.
But all those things were awful, but they weren't existence threatening. And the environment we face now, you could make an argument, has that potential. Economically, there are some the federal government is just on an unsustainable financial path. Period. And then there's all the culture issues where it just seems like we're tearing each other apart, and a lot of people worry about what is it that we believe? Do we believe anything in common anymore, et cetera? And all of these are really rough things. And the issue with all of them is, and our politics is so paralyzed and so polarized that we seem incapable of beginning to deal with any of these things. But here's what I would say.
That's hard to hear. That's true.
But okay, how do people react to dealing with hard decisions that they don't have to deal with? They avoid them, right? So we haven't had any hard decisions as a country for 30 years. Since the fall of the Iron Curtain, really. There's been nothing, there have been issues, there have been problems, but like nothing life-threatening. And so as a result...
Tell us, I mean, for some people, that's a long, long time ago. What was special about 30 years ago?
Well, again, the fall of the Iron Curtain, which is like the early 90s, okay? So when the Soviet Union ceased to really be a kind of a geopolitical threat, we stood astride the world as the sole superpower. No, kind of unchallengeable by anybody. And we're several years into entering a world where that's not the case anymore for the first time in a long time. And so my kind of thing about the human beings, their natural tendency is if they don't have to face a hard decision, they won't. So the result is that we haven't had any tough political decisions to make for a long, long time. And so our politics has devolved into just this profound unseriousness.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing.
You keep saying iron wall for our listeners. We're talking the wall in Germany? What's the iron wall?
The Iron Curtain.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, in other words, the fall of communism.
Gotcha.
And the Soviet Union kind of being the epicenter, and then the emergence into freedom of all of the Eastern European countries that had been satellites.
So the Iron Curtain is not metaphorical for the wall in Germany that went down, just for the Cold War in general.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
I put my ignorance out on display for everybody,
well, again,
Jack.
it's one of those things where, like, I wrote a post on Pearl Harbor Day, and Jack said, you need to explain what Pearl Harbor Day is because a lot of people aren't going to know.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But anyway, so my point, though, then is, but that's not irrevocable. We can be serious in our politics, and we will when we have to be. And that's the tendency that democracies have. They're always behind the curve when it comes to facing hard decisions.
Yeah.
But then once they coalesce behind a direction, they can move faster and more powerfully than any other type of government can move because they have people unified and moving in the same direction. So what I would say is that though it looks bleak now and their problems look unsolvable, in large part, that's because we've been through this era where we haven't had to solve any problems. We can solve problems again. Will we? I don't know, but I don't see any reason why.
Dang.
What kind of hard decisions would prompt that? Like if you're just looking into the future and you're saying these type of things would unite.
China invades Taiwan would be one. Russia decides to drop nuclear weapons. Or to threaten NATO countries with nuclear weapons would be another. Iran launches a full-scale invasion of Saudi Arabia.
All right, so for real question, Lynn, everybody in their faith journey or life journey has different strengths and weaknesses. Would this be a weakness area? These conversations stress you out and burden you, or can you be a part of conversations and be like, I don't have control over this stuff and I trust God? Like, who's Lynn with these conversations? Because these used to bother me really badly, and I guess an area of maturity. I don't know.
Yeah,
because I don't get all caught up in it because there's nothing I can do.
It goes back and forth. Like right now, I'm not like it's not stressing me out. And I think that has come in time. I mean, and I would even say for me, 2020 was really like a checkpoint and like me having to capture my thoughts and saying like, hey, I'm not in control of this stuff. And I had to stop like looking at news feeds every 15 minutes and checking all the things. So this has been a progression for me. But for the most part, I'm like, oh, that doesn't bother me as much. Like I can't do anything about it now. When there's something that's directly impacting me, I'll get involved, but I'm not gonna lose sleep over.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. I think some people will hear this question and be like, whoa, that's sci-fi, outer space stuff. I don't even know what you're talking about. Where some people will be like, yeah, I think about this kind of thing all the time. Specifically, Jack's here. Lynn too. Nobody cares what I think about this, but do y'all have thoughts of, yes, it could happen for AI to take over and have an animosity towards humanity to try to exterminate them? I mean, movies are having fun with this sort of thing, but people are saying, hey, y'all don't realize AI is dangerous. And I know we've talked about this before, that I was like, Jack, is there ever a time when AI is not a complex spreadsheet? And you're like, no. And I was like, I didn't think so. Like, what am I missing here? But is there a chance of, oh my gosh, AI is taking over and now humanity is threatened?
I don't know.
And do you hear that as a stupid question?
No,
do you hear that?
No, it's kind of an important question. Not because I'm nervous about AI, but because I'm nervous about people. Because I think all of the people that I see working in that field seem very, very uninterested in consequences and all interested in possibility. You asked earlier, like where would we rank ourselves in terms of intelligence? And just one of the things I thought is like the stupidest people on the planet are the smartest people on the planet, in my experience. It's like, you can be so smart that you just have zero common sense and, you can't see anything other than what you're doing. Like intelligence that isn't tempered by common sense and wisdom that's not good. And so like, I don't really have any concerns about AI having animosity. It's more like I'm more concerned about people creating a program that they lose control of and can't stop. I think
But what is the thing they can't stop?
Well, so I mean, if you look, so now we're coming to the limits of my technical knowledge, right? But
we're not asking for your expertise. We're asking for your opinion.
It's like if you develop a program that what would be great is if I could just remotely shut off my washing machine, and then suddenly use control, and now no one can turn the washing machine on, I've got this thing where my fridge I can lock it via Wi-Fi, so like I can only eat at certain hours. And now no one can open their fridge. Like there's just the potential. Like, has anyone not had a device do something that it's like, shoot, what did I do? How do I undo it? Right? Mm-hmm. So that at scale in ways that, are directly, connected to our infrastructure, that's the sort of thing that's more concerning. I think that the only like doomsday scenario that I thought was compelling in a that makes sense to me way is someone says, so, let's say, someone designs an AI that, only that can make paper clips, and that's what it does. And then, the thing decides that, well, really everything should be a paper clip. That's my function. I turn things into paper clips. And so, people should be paper clips. And it just like starts destroying things because it has one function and that's all it knows. And so it just goes around turning things into paper.
Idea.
Right, that's like horror movie stuff. But like that's the sort of thing, you design a program not thinking about what would happen if this, thing gets into, and there's a reason that, some AIs, they kind of programs, they, keep them off the open internet, or whatever. It's like there's a reason that it would be kind of insane to put, like all of our nuclear capabilities on the internet, right? Like, so anyway, it's not like I'm not worried about evil robots. I'm worried about stupid humans.
Gotcha. No, is there a risk of evil robots in your opinion? Like, is that even a risk?
No, because I don't think robots can be evil. It's like evil hammers.
Yeah, I watched a movie recently. It was a pretty neat handling of AI called The Creator. And what I thought was interesting, I think the setting was 2065. And I told my kids over dinner, I said, hey, you guys think about this, but I think that there is a possibility, some of the arguments that different generations are having right now. I said, I think you guys may be the grandparents, the older generation that is telling your kids and their grandkids they're not people, they're spreadsheets. Because in the movie, you had a bunch of people saying, you have to treat them equal just like anybody else. And you could tell they were portraying, hey, this is where we're going to be divided at some point. Some people are going to say, hey, we treat them as equals. And other people are just like, but they're not. They're humans. Touch on this a little bit, Jack.
Well, I guess what comes to mind, I mean, I'm the least technologically adept person around the table here, so I won't try to go there. But a writer who has had a couple of very interesting explorations of this is Kazuo Ishiguro, who's won the Nobel Prize for Literature some years ago. And actually, both of them, I just think both the books that I'm thinking about are fascinating in terms of implications for faith. So one of them is called Clara and the Sun, which was his most recent novel. And Clara is a robot, but a robot designed to be a human companion. What happens is this family buys Clara at the robot store, and their thought was maybe they could make Clara, because their daughter had an incurable disease. And maybe what they could do is get Clara to mimic their daughter so well that it would be like having their daughter after their daughter died.
Wow.
And anyway, Clara, though, has this belief that if she could only get the little girl out into the sun, because she saw a drunk, in the urban alley across from the store where she was for sale, wake up when the sun hit him. So Clara, who's not a very advanced robot in some ways, and what happens is the sun hits the girl and she is healed late in the book. And it's like, what does that mean? I have no idea. And I don't think he's trying to say it means anything, but it's just, and then another one is one of his wonderful books. It's called Never Let Me Go. And the idea is, it's again, a future society where they have cloned people and they are raising them so that they can harvest their organs. Mm. And then the big question that the book asks is, are they human? Do they have a soul? What does that mean? And it's interesting.
That's super interesting.
Anyway, so I don't know. I guess that's kind of what I think. Like, to me, there are all kinds of questions that in a lot of ways, the questions all point back to us is the way I think about it.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that I can't comprehend is how does someone outside of maybe there's some sort of a mental challenge or something going on, but how does someone go from losing a child to I'm going to make myself feel better by keeping my child? How do they cross that line that, but I still know that's not like that. There's no life to it. There's no consciousness to it. Like, can people get there? And so I want to go to what you've been thinking about as far as art is concerned. It would be a novelty, and I think there may be some out there already, but it would be a novelty to listen to a podcast conversation that's completely by AI. I think there's some stuff out there. But after a while, I wouldn't do it unless it was unbelievably entertaining. But if I was listening to it to like connect with them as people, it would never happen because I could never make that jump. These aren't people. They don't even know what they're saying. Do you think people will ever be like, I don't care, that moves me, and I connect with that AI? Sometimes you really hate my questions.
No, I don't. Well, let me go back a little bit because you talked about like the idea of like your kids will be the grandparents and saying like that's not a person, and I do think that one of the things, and so in some ways like I feel like there's not actually been a really grown up conversation about like the idea of like animal rights because and what I mean is like the desire to give things dignity is a very human thing to do. And so like the idea of like, oh, animals have rights, I don't think that's a super weird impulse. And therefore animals are people. To me, it's like, see, no. But I think that's like hey, are we supposed to treat all living things with dignity? It's like, yeah, I mean, like, being stewards of creation means something. And so in the same way, it's like the idea of, could there be a point where, robots say, whatever we want to say is we want to confer some kind of human dignity on it. It's like I could see that. And I think I'd be somewhat sympathetic to that impulse. Because I think like in a sense, like that impulse is kind of reflected of, like being creatures who were created, who also ourselves create things. So like, could I see people listening to completely AI podcasts or whatever? It's like, yeah, sure. I mean, listen, you're doing it right now in the sense of the articles you read. There are a ton of, there are a ton of outlets who don't employ human writers for things. Like they've been open and upfront about it.
Oh my gosh.
They've been open about it. And some of them the byline has a human name, but it's not a human.
Wow.
And
they're good articles? Like,
they're trash.
Oh, they're trash. I didn't know.
Well, no.
AI sucks at writing. I didn't know.
AI is terrible at writing. AI is also, so here's the thing is like, part of my thing is AI art good? It's like, well, AI art isn't art. And like that is almost like a hill I'll die on for me because I just don't think you can make art if you're not a human. Because AI doesn't create anything. It just regurgitates things. Like AI does not have any sort of creative impulse, right? It's not inspired. It's not asking questions. It's not trying to achieve something. It just makes stuff, right? There's AI art is the same thing as a factory assembly line where this thing stamps license plates or molds or whatever. It's the same thing. It doesn't really matter how pretty it looks. And AI writing and AI art, if like the first few times you see AI art, you're like, oh wow, that's indistinguishable. The more you see it, the more you can instantly recognize AI art. In part, like in part because for some reason AI programs have just the hardest time doing human hands. They look like just horror movies. It's hilarious. But AI writing is the same. AI writing, is what a bad writer thinks good writing sounds like a lot of times.
Gotcha.
But it's not really a question of quality. I don't care how good an AI can get at making art, and I don't care how good it can get at writing. It's not actually creating anything. And the thing I really hate about it in the creative space is that when creatives use AI, they might say, oh, I'm just skipping over a part. I hate doing this. It's like, it's not a big deal anyway. It's like, well, you're just letting that part atrophy. Because one, I think it's not as good as it would have been otherwise. But also, skipping the hard part is like, that's the essence of what creating is, right? It's like getting past that point of, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not sure if I'm succeeding. I don't know what I'm trying to do. And then actually doing something. There was, I don't know if you saw the text I sent you, but there was a piece where, it was basically someone talking to a writer about who uses an AI program. And this writer talks about how they kind of like, they don't use it as much. And they said that, so basically this writer, she'll give it kind of the basics of a scene, give it a prompt, and then let it write. And the writer said this, like, I know we're going into the lobby, and I know that this lobby is a secret paranormal fish hospital for naiads, but I don't care. really what it looks like, other than there's 2 big fish tanks with tons of fish and it's high end. So she tells it that and it gives her 150 words about crystal chandeliers, gold etching and marble. And then the writer says, my time is better spent on the important aspects of the mystery and on the story than sitting there for 10 minutes trying to come up with the description of the lobby. And I just, I read that my feeling is what I really want this person to understand is that they're not a writer. And it was really satisfying just to see every writer on Twitter just react with fury, because it's it's the same sort of thing. It's boy, I don't really feel like getting my kid dressed this morning. I want to, as long as I'm there for the teachable moments, I don't need to be there for the unimportant stuff.
Right.
It's it's just a garbage way to view your own craft.
Yeah.
As though, who cares about the important things? Why not let a 5-year-old write them?
Right.
And the deal is, I think my response to that was, just me letting my skill atrophy until all I'm capable of is writing witty one-liners to, jokes supplied to me by AI bots. Right? It's you're letting a part of your ability die when you behave that way. And it really, again, it's really I find that incredibly disrespectful to your readers, incredibly disrespectful to yourself. You're deciding not to become better.
It's also just bad art. It's okay, so if what's inside the lobby isn't important, why are you dealing with it at all? You don't have to describe it. Why is it that's a red herring? Why are you putting that in there anyway? What's the matter with you?
Yeah. Well, and if your story has unimportant parts, just go ahead and write the Wikipedia plot summary of your novel instead of publishing it all. You know what I mean? That's what I do for, there are movies I know I will never watch and do not care about, but I might what was that movie about again? I'll just read the Wikipedia plot summary. It's just do that. Don't publish. Just write Wikipedia articles. Just makes me angry.
Well, we'll definitely have in the show notes links for the link for people to be able to come and read this stuff. It really is fun. Did you know that one of our giving lanes with Legacy, we're creating an additional AI Lynn bot? Because there's so much more that could get done, so much more leadership. So that's in our Legacy giving lane.
Here's what I'll say. The thing about AI is
that's a good lane, right? First say it's a good lane.
Well, my view is we could definitely use more Lyns, but I'm just thankful we have one.
Yeah. Same. I do not want a Cylon Lynn walking around.
Waffle House. Let's wrap up with that. I thought it was a brilliant piece, and I have to agree. You can't argue against Waffle House. You like Waffle House, right?
Like Waffle House.
I was going to say. I would still respect you. It would just be I'd have to navigate that one, Lynn. If you just said I
of
can't
all
say,
the things,
I would have to navigate that.
One.
Yeah,
okay.
for sure. You brought up in the South, and you don't like Waffle House. There's just you got to question that. Got to question that. Tell us about that piece.
Well, actually, so Fridays we do these short pieces on Jack, call it the good stuff, and sometimes it's something we've read, sometimes it's a product that we use that we like, and
just a recommendation.
It's a recommendation, yes. And I struggle with that, and what it makes me realize is how devoid of products my life is.
Well, actually, real quick, I do feel like when we've talked about this, the thing has been trying to get. Well, not trying to get, because I have the same thing, but it's you can actually tell people things about yourself, and some of them might actually end up being interesting. And I feel like that was kind of met with a level of incomprehension, because I think it was why don't you tell people about an album you like? And I think you just kind of looked at me. But why would I do that?
Yeah.
But the Waffle House feels universal, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I was inspired. We probably got more comments on that piece than anything else. I wrote a peon to the Waffle House, and Jack accompanied it then with a clip of Anthony Bourdain visiting the Waffle House in Charleston.
Yeah. Maybe the most shared Anthony Bourdain clip.
Better than the French Laundry.
Better than the French Laundry. And he means it. He's not just saying it either.
All right, wrap up with y'all brought your little write-up on what you love about the other person kind of for Valentine's. Like a little love letter to your dad. Why are you looking at me like that?
I do feel like AI could do what you do. fairly well.
Thank you. Thank y'all for listening.
You've been listening to the Things You Won't Hear on Sunday Seacoast podcast. In the show notes, you'll see a link to our Facebook group page. Also, we'd love for you to consider subscribing so you get these episodes downloaded right when they come out. Thanks so much for listening.